Okay, the next order of business is the ID2, ID3 task force. The board to support the establishment of an ID2, ID3 task force. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is similar to the approach we took with the Parking Implementation Committee. It's to essentially, based on the discussion at town meeting, there was 2 proposed projects on opposite sides of town, one on Dascom Road, one on River Road, to modify the zoning from ID2 to ID3. This would be simply to establish a task force that can explore all of the potential pros and cons of a zoning change. It would include representations of the residents, my office, liaisons from the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, School Committee, representative from Public Safety, representative from Public Works, a representative from Planning, and we'd like a representative from EDC. So we'd like to get going as soon as possible. So I'm essentially just asking the board to vote to allow me to proceed with the establishment of the group.
It's important to know there's 2 at-large residents as well on that.
And a senior resident.
Is this primarily regarding the, what we went through at town meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, this is for the proposal that was made down on Dascom Road, correct?
Correct, and I think, I mean, the scope of the group could be expanded to look at what...
That's what's driving it, right?
Yes.
So what is the status of that, that proposal which was pulled by, it's a private article, it was a private article. Has that been brought back for a special town meeting, or since we're doing this, what is the status of that?
Sure, so the property owner, Lapoli Companies, they've indicated that they're going to do a project either way, whether it be within the restrictions of ID2 versus ID3. And I think it's time that the community has an opportunity to weigh the differences and the associated impacts of a development under ID2 and ID3.
And are they going to, I understand the purpose, but if they're not going to request that same proposal with the residential, then I'm just wondering, from a sequencing standpoint, have we heard about what their proposal is going to be?
I have no notification that they're going to come before town meeting in the fall.
If there is, well, the way I understood that sounded like that was going to trigger a special town meeting.
Right. At this point, I mean, could we get there? Yes, but at this point,
There is no.
there's nothing.
Well, there was no trigger. There was no trigger. It was
There's no trigger.
The proponent for the private warrant article withdrew it.
Yeah, but they were the thought that they were going to call. But when I say trigger, meaning
Yeah.
that was going to come back and
They have the
to
option.
trigger a
Yeah.
special town meeting,
Yeah,
right?
it's
the
a private
option.
warrant article. They have the option.
And as I recall, the grant from the state has to be exercised, if at all, within a certain time period, and that's why we were talking about a fall town meeting.
Although
Do we have
we're
an
not
update
sure
on-
what the strings are in that, right? That was a.
We're doing our best to find out what the strings are, but they're not clear to us as of right now. I think the existing funds are in place. For what duration they are, that's something we're working on, because part of the MassWorks program is that they want projects, not to use a term from 5 years ago, shovel ready or ready to go. So we'll continue to work through that. But again, that can all be part of this group.
We did tell town meeting we were going to do this.
Well, it was the recommendation of a member of town meeting, and we followed suit.
But the MassWorks grant application was not dependent on that zoning change. It was put in there that it was out there and it would need a town meeting. Well, that's where the confusion comes from.
We disclosed it.
Yeah, no, I remember when we
Yeah,
signed it in
yeah.
August or whatever. So it's still confusing to me on what does that MassWorks grant really mean? And since we haven't heard anything, then
We
it's confusing to you as well.
Yeah, it
The
is.
money is in place, though. It is not, they have not withdrawn it.
They have not
They
withdrawn.
granted
They haven't given
have
this to
not-
us either.
But they haven't withdrawn it. They gave it to us based upon a plan that could not go forward at town meeting. I think that at this point, they're waiting to see whether or not it's a commercial plan or a residential commercial plan.
We don't know the difference yet.
And I recall that the grant application that the board all supported had an indicator that there would be 175 housing units on that development. So the grant was tied to some form of housing as well, or it was in the grant application.
Yeah, it said that
Was
it
subject
it's
to
subject
town
to a
meeting
town meeting
approval.
vote,
Yep,
though. It was
right,
not,
right,
it was
yep,
like an
right.
optional thing, yeah.
Right,
And
yeah.
the grant, we heard about the grant late April, it's now late June. 2 months have gone by. Do we understand what the delay is in hearing back on the terms? Because the understanding I had was we had a state grant of which a portion, an undefined portion, was subject to the residential component that didn't pass at town meeting. So,
The way this works is, in order to proceed with engaging with the state, in order to actually receive the funds and then use the funds for improvements, we need a letter of intent. We've been waiting on that. I've talked to the secretary a couple of times. I'll continue to do so. But at this time, we have not received that letter of intent, and that's really what cements the terms of the Mass Works grant.
I think I might be able to shed some light on that. And I've had some discussions with them, and these economic development grants are tied to a specific project. So they're I think the state, and I actually know the state, is waiting to see which project comes forward, so that they can, so that the town may receive the full $6 million if the residential component passes. And I think that they would still go forward with the $6 million if they thought that there was a fall town meeting and that it was going to be at least voted upon.
Well, that's
If
what.
not, and it's just fully commercial, they would have to act upon that plan and see if that might be $4, $5, $6 million, or $7 or $8 million, who knows, with a full commercial.
But I think there were a lot of questions asked at town meeting that the residents need answers to. So this group will have all the appropriate stakeholders at the table and can communicate effectively back to
well, and the question is who moves this forward? Meaning the private developer with a private warrant article has every right to pursue a fall town meeting on their own. In
Correct.
fact, that was the outcome of town meeting. There was no commitment on the part of anyone to do anything in the fall. It was simply suggested that this needed more time
Correct.
for people, for residents to understand. But all that happened at town meeting officially was 2 articles were withdrawn. There was no binding commitment or vote or understanding that there would be a fall town meeting, nor that there would be any movement. It really is a private warrant article.
That's
Well,
why I'm
actually,
surprised
no.
the developer
Actually,
hasn't
not.
come back with a,
We did tell town meeting that we were going to form this task force.
No,
Yeah, we did.
I don't think we did. There was a,
it's a request.
well, I'd like to know when specifically that happened at town meeting, because I don't recall at all there was a commitment to form a task force. What happened was Attorney Rosen tried to make an amendment to say, wanted to force the formation of some committee. Now, his amendment was ruled out of order. Mr. Vespoli, just before he withdrew, adopted the spirit
Lapoli.
of Mr. Lapoli. I apologize. Thank you. What did I say? Mr. Lapoli adopted the spirit of what Attorney Rosen said, but that was not binding. Just because he says, well, we should form a commission doesn't make it so. So in terms of what officially happened at town meeting was 2 private warrant articles were withdrawn, and therefore we are back to square one as far as to where we go.
I agree it was not binding. There was no binding vote that took place to
Right.
the commission. But the spirit of what happened there was we told people that this
Who's the
task
we?
force,
Who's the we?
we
You
meaning
say we told them.
town meeting was given the impression
By whom?
by,
By Sal Lapoli.
okay, what's wrong with that? And we all agreed that that's what it would be.
Well, if he gave them that impression, he has every right to move forward with a private warrant article and create a private town meeting.
Informational, okay? This is to
Yes.
give the people the information so that they can or cannot make this commitment. So if you're against people getting information, then vote against it. But this is a task force that we're going to form so that people can get information,
made-
so that they might have the information to be able to make an informed decision.
But for what purpose?
But one of the reasons, or one of the things I've seen task force be successful or not successful is if they're formed without a good charter.
Right.
Typically, we vote on a task force when there's a charter. So we don't have a charter here, so I don't know if we're on the same.
Yes, I agree.
But the question is, what's the charter of the task force? I've been on task force that didn't have
Andrew
it.
just said
Town
Andrew just
manager
said it.
Yeah.
Andrew
It's
just said
Just to
it.
explore the potential development impacts of an development in ID2 versus a potential development under ID3. Traffic, safety, all the issues that were brought up at town meeting. All I'm trying to do is not to bind anybody to anything, just to put answers out there.
So do you see this task force, Andrew, as a more of a liaison
That's all it
that
is.
would work with the owner of the property to try and better understand what the town of Andover wants on that property?
Right, I
And
mean,
what the
I
town's willing to,
would imagine the group will engage
what the concerns are.
any property owner that's looking to develop.
Actually, they wouldn't be authorized to say
93.
what the town really wants, Dan, at all.
Well,
So they-
but it's a diverse committee, diverse task force that would represent interests across the community where the task force could work with the owners of the property and try to identify what it is the community's interests are in that property.
If the charge is, and you mentioned the charge, if the charge is to see what ID2 and ID3 could possibly bring forward, and to see the comparison of what those two things might be like, then this is very informational for the town, and then the town can decide.
Yeah, I
But
think there ought to be a
an
clear
ID3
charter, though. The problem is these.
That's what that is.
I think it's got to be clearer than that, because I've seen task force when you just put it out there for feasibility, for instance, where there was a task force that was set up to see if it was feasible. And everybody argued in the beginning, of course it's feasible. No matter what you do, it's feasible. I just question if you start a task group, and by the way, I have no, just so you know, I have no issue with forming a group based on the fact of what we heard at town meeting.
Right.
My only concern, and of being on task force that didn't have a clear charter, is I think this ought to have a clear charter. Just to explore, to me, is
I
not
look at that as really clear. What he explained it was to show the differences between an ID2 and an ID3.
We have it drafted, I just asked John to print copies.
the charter, the charter, okay.
What the charge is.
Are we particular to the property located on Dascom Road?
No.
No?
Nope.
All right.
ID3 in general. ID2 to ID3 in general.
Because we had two proposals to go from ID2 to ID3 at town meeting this year.
I mean, this is to gather information. I think is that what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, it doesn't guarantee what action could be coming forward with regard to somebody bringing something to town meeting,
We
whether it
can't
be.
presume what they'll do or say. What we want to do is have them provide information to the townspeople so that we can look at, if something does go forward, you have the information, what an ID2 and ID3 could possibly yield.
Right. And a private developer, private resident could still, with 200 signatures, submit a request for a special anyway.
Andrew, I feel like we're talking in code here with ID2 and ID3 for anybody here that might not be understanding. ID2 is the current zoning
Correct.
in the Dascom Road area and in the River Road
Correct.
commercial area, right? Existing ID2. ID3 does not exist.
Does not exist anywhere in town.
ID3 is what was proposed at town meeting. It was to convert the Dascom Road parcels from ID2 to ID3, a brand new zoning category that had certain limited residential zoning component, correct?
Correct.
Okay, is that what we are still talking about? Or are we talking about looking at the ID2 zones both and thinking about what residential component may be allowed in both
Actually,
IDT
first, what
zones?
ID2s were both last time as well. All the ID2 zones were proposed to go to ID3.
How many of them?
The one on River Road?
Two, yeah, just two.
The ones on
River
River
Road,
Road,
River
yeah.
Road.
Yes,
Yeah, River Road
yes.
and
If that had gone forward and had passed, ID2 on River Road would have been ID3.
or
Oh, I don't know.
I know that's what
Yes,
happened with
I
the
think that's
drive-through,
right.
yeah, I remember the
Well,
drive-through
yes,
would have.
absolutely.
drive-through was something else though.
That was a pla- that would've-
That would have gone, would have
Wait,
separate.
well,
Drive-through
subject
gas
to-
is a different-
No, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought the ID3, the town meeting voted, everyone was focused on Dascom Road, that the change from ID2 to ID3 was limited to the Dascom Road
Both.
parcels. Are you saying that you would have added a limited residential component to the ID2 area up on River Road?
It
There
would have
been
done that.
That it would have done that?
It would have done that.
Yeah, perfect.
I think using 93s maybe a bit for
Is that?
Tom, am I correct?
I don't remember.
I'm trying to remember.
I thought ID3 was
I do
limited to the
remember.
I thought
Dasco.
it was limited to the Daska Road
No,
too.
it wasn't. I do-
But then there was the River Road one, which, yeah, I
I
think,
know that it was the other way around because when that's what, I think that's what people, that was one of the negatives on it, right? Was they
Right.
didn't want, people didn't want to
right, if the ID3
vote
didn't
on that was
pass,
the other,
then,
right.
yeah,
It would have been
the
applicable to both
drive-throughs would have
sites.
applied to both sites.
That I
Right.
remember, yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually, if you look at it the other
I
way,
have it
then
right here, Article 58.
Was it both?
The article proposes to create an industrial mixed-use zone, ID3, in an area bound by I-93, the town of Tewksbury and Dascom Road, and is comprised of 4 parcels that are currently zoned ID2. There's no
not
reference,
River
there's no
Road?
reference to the
It's-
River Road.
No, but the other one that was previous, or maybe it was, I don't remember, maybe it was subsequent, the Mr. Stupinski's, I believe
Yeah.
his
His
That was a
was
different-
ID.
would have affected both the River Road ID2 and the Dascom Road
looking
ID2.
for-
But that
He was
wasn't
looking for
ID3.
housing.
That wasn't ID3.
That wasn't 93,
That
that
was
was,
the drive-through.
that was, did I stand correct?
No,
I
drive-throughs was
positive
separate.
it was
He
that
was
one.
trying to add a residential component on
pulled-
a
Yeah,
he
different
wanted to add
one. Yes,
residential,
well,
yeah.
just like the Dascom Road one was.
he pulled it before even town meeting. He was going to pull.
Okay, do we have a motion?
What, excuse me, what is the composition? I didn't see it here. What's the
you review
proposed
that?
composition of the
It's
task
not in the packet.
force? Did I miss that?
I can run through it. It's 2
Liaison Board of
residents.
Selectmen,
I'm
liaison
sorry?
planning board, the designee of the town manager, member of the design review board, member of the economic development council, resident located in proximity to the ID2 zoning districts, and 2 at-large residents.
Should be in your packet.
Where are you reading from?
This wasn't in mine.
I didn't see it.
Right, but what is the, did the board get that?
We should have.
This was a
If they
draft.
haven't, we'll
Might be in
send
the
it. I'll
back.
send it right
This was
now.
an 84-page packet, so it
No,
might
it
be in
wasn't in
there.
mine. I printed it.
So, Chief of Police, Director of Municipal Services, myself, Director of Planning, 2 residents at large, a senior citizen resident, a member of the Design Review Board, a liaison from the Planning Board, a liaison from the Selectmen, a liaison from the Finance Committee. That's the composition.
Yeah, I'd like to treat this as a first reading on that, because I need some more time to think about whether or not we want to create a task force to be exploring adding residential
Do
zoning
we have
to
a,
all
uh,
ID2.
Does anybody else have a
I would be
motion?
okay with the first reading on something like this because we don't even have a proposal right now. It's
Right.
June.
Kind of doing this on the fly. There's no charter.
I would like to see a better charter. I'd like to see a charter. I'm not against.
You'll print a charter?
I'm not against the concept of it at all, but I want to make sure it's a successful group.
I'm concerned about that because our next meeting is not for several weeks, and if we're looking at possibly having a fall meeting, that really gives the task force very little time.
We'll read the charge in the record right now. Is that acceptable?
Please.
Yeah, my concern is the assumption in that, which is if we are going to have a fall town meeting. I don't feel like we have to pressure
Operative word
ourselves.
was if.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's what these people will decide. If there is or is not going to be recommended a
no,
recommended town meeting.
Yeah.
it's the private.
it's a private
petitioner.
warrant
It
article.
doesn't
Right.
necessarily have to
It
be.
is. Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to
So
be.
you're changing it by saying
No, I'm
this
not
group.
changing
Now,
anything.
you just said. I just want
This
to be clear.
group might recommend that the town, it's beneficial for the town to bring it forward.
private article.
And it might be this group might
Right now,
recommend.
it's not an article at all.
It's nothing right now. This is information. That's all this is.
If you mind, we'll
Please.
read.
ID2 Zoning Task Force. At the 2017 annual town meeting, residents were presented with 2 private zoning articles which contemplated the allowance of limited residential development within 2 ID2 zoning districts that are located off of Dascom Road and River Road. Although both articles were withdrawn from town meeting, there was a spirited community conversation regarding the merits of both proposals, with the goal of further investigating if housing within these ID2 zoning districts is an appropriate use for both an industrial district as well as the town as a whole, I respectfully request that the board vote to establish an ID2 zoning task force. This task force will facilitate a public engagement process to review the existing conditions, explore options for the ID2 zoning districts, and if appropriate, prepare a zoning article for a future town meeting's consideration. I recommend that the task force be comprised as follows: a liaison from the Board of Selectmen, a liaison from the Planning Board, designee of the Town Manager, a member of the Design Review Board, a member of the Economic Development Council, resident located in proximity to the ID2 zoning districts, and then 2 at-large residents. Upon your approval, I would further request that you provide me with the authority to populate the task force and begin organizing a meeting schedule.
Can you just read that one statement again where you said propose a special town meeting again? Just read that sentence.
Propose a warrant article for a fall town meeting.
So the task force will facilitate a public engagement process to review existing conditions, explore options for the ID2 zoning districts, and if appropriate, prepare a zoning article for future town meeting consideration.
If appropriate, I mean, we're not locking ourselves into anything.
So they'd all be publicly posted meetings, plenty of opportunity for residents to participate and to be part of the process. And it could evolve itself to a point where a petitioner, owner of an ID2 property could work with this task force to help define the parameters that would go into a warrant article, right?
Potentially.
So it could be a public-private partnership to help bring forth a zoning change.
We've received a number of questions with regard to Dascom Road. We know something's coming, whether it be with an ID2 or potentially ID3. I'm just looking to facilitate a conversation to provide a comparative analysis of what's allowable by right now, what could be potentially allowable, and what are the associated impacts with both.
And with that information, I mean, information's power. We can look at it and say, well, we could, as a board at that point, look at all of this information and say, we believe that this option rather than that option, because of all of the reasons we see was brought forward by this task force, is better for the town. So without that information, I mean, this is for...
It's like when we do a TIF. It's like when we do a TIF. We work with a private company to bring forth a TIF that is mutually beneficial.
True, but we've got we've got more of a kind of clear outcome that we're trying to do with a TIF. And I just to respond to Laura, we could meet anytime to if we can go first reading on this, we can meet next week. We can meet anytime to ratify this.
What should happen between now and next week?
I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with the clarity of the charter. So that's just me. But you know, that's you know.
Is everybody else uncomfortable with it?
Look at it. I just want to say I've been on committees where I've seen committees where whether it be a fire station or other things or trash where
That's what he just read. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't.
It's pretty clear to me.
You've seen it before. We don't have it in our package.
So what new information would be helpful to you to make a decision, or is it just?
I think
you
it's the
wanna
charter.
sit
I
on
think
it
no. I think I'd like to see the charter be a little more specific. Because what is the desired outcome? You know, are we going to review the prior submission that was made and use that as the benchmark?
Well, we're not going to do anything. So, I mean,
Well, we're us as a town are, right? We're going to empower this group to do something, and I want to see them succeed. By the way, okay? Because the good task force succeed when it's a clear indication. Otherwise, they do get mired up because they sit there and say, okay, at some point, what are we supposed to be doing? And you know, you get the whole scope creep thing. So all I'm saying is, give them clear marching orders on exactly what. And if it's review what the prior proposal was as a benchmark and say, this was proposed to us last time, let's measure that based on these other things, then that makes sense. I think that makes
But
sense.
when you figure out-
We're doing without a proposal here.
So
that-
when they figure out how to get there, we kind of give them a vision, figure out how this works, and how to get there is, okay, review the prior proposal.
Well, I think we should say that then. I think we should say that based on town meeting, there was confusion on that particular proposal. That was the proposal. The mass works, grant works, everything was kind of tied to that. And there were a lot of questions that came up, and you could feel it during town meeting. I don't know what the vote would have been at the beginning, at the end, but you could feel the shift of the questions that were asked, right? So I thought it was a good, genuine suggestion by whoever the person was that made it in the town meeting floor, that we do put a group of people together to measure and understand what those answers are. So all I'm saying, Dan, is where I would feel more comfortable if we use that as a benchmark and said, and that's why I asked the question. Why are I'm surprised we haven't seen anything yet from the proponent that would say we're going to come back with the same thing in the fall and we're going to participate in this. That's my only
That's
point.
definitely narrowing from what Andrew was talking about, which was also talking about the River Road piece. So that's what you're talking about seems to be limited to the Dascom Road proposal.
That's what the zoning article was for, I thought.
This is what the charge
There were
says.
multiple
But
zoning
you're looking at
articles.
both, right, Laura?
And
You're
it would
looking
seem
at
to me
both.
that we don't want to restrict the flexibility of a group that's gathering information to a proposal that has been withdrawn.
It was.
I mean, it may be part of the process that they want to look at because it was a proposal that was put forth and a lot of effort was put into it, but it may not be the appropriate proposal.
Okay, the charge says, the goal of further investigating if housing within these ID2 zoning districts is an appropriate use for both an industrial district as well as the town as a whole. I respectfully request that the board vote to establish an ID2 zoning task force. This task force will facilitate a public engagement process to review existing conditions, explore options for the ID2 zoning districts, and if appropriate, prepare a zoning article for further town meeting consideration.
And if I remember,
That's a clear charge.
we had two
Clear charge.
proposals for residential. One, the board voted 5-0 to not recommend, and that was up in River Road. And the other was 4-1 for the other ID2, right, at Dascom Road. So the board looked at it as two different, not as one combined. So are we going to ask, should we change the designation so that, I mean, one size does not fit? Well, no, one size does not fit all. We already said that, right?
But let's let them further investigate it, and to Laura's point, why narrow their scope when it can be general? We can make it narrow later. They may make it narrow themselves. But that is what I just read is a very clear scope. It's very clear to me what we would be asking them to do.
By the way, for the record, I don't have this in the packet.
I don't either.
We can print it out
Okay.
at a later. Yeah, I don't know how it didn't get in the packet.
May I ask who
apologize.
drafted that, Andrew?
Myself and the planning staff.
Okay. Was it put in the Dropbox for the board?
It was my understanding it did. If it didn't, I apologize.
Okay.
I'll get it to you.
I don't remember seeing it.
Well, it's still pretty clear what you're asking for.
Me, John, and
Is
Paul worked on it.
Whether you have the
Paul
paper or
Matarazzo.
not, that is the charge. So if you agree with the charge, then please. If not, then we can move forward. Or move.
We'll get copies right now.
So do we have any sort of a motion?
I move that we authorize Andrew to create a task force as described by the deputy town manager and further described by statements that the chair read from the form being provided.
It was the same, by the way. It's been moved
And seconded.
and seconded. Any further discussion?
I plan to abstain because I think this should be a first reading. The board hasn't seen a copy of the charter in advance. We didn't have a chance to think about this. So I'd rather have this be a first reading.
It is pretty easy to understand, though, isn't it?
In your view.
Okay, that's difficult.
In your
don't
view.
understand
In your view.
Well, ask me a question. I can explain.
Yeah,
it to you.
I'm going to abstain because this should have been distributed in advance. Give us a chance to think about it. And there's no reason. This is,
Any further discussion? Members of the public? Yes?
Steve Fig, 26 Bateson Drive. Boy, gee whiz, that's what I heard the audience asking for. So I understand the questions you're asking, and I'm not sure I can weigh in on those, but this, ultimately getting to the point of doing this seems like a very good idea.
What do you mean, which audience?
The audience that was at town meeting considering that project.
So you're saying that the audience at town meeting was asking for a committee to study the issue? I just want to make sure we understand what you're
For
saying.
one of the parcels, yeah.
There were a lot of questions that they saw the answers for, which they didn't have. And I think they wanted answers not from the developer, but from a public ombudsman, if you will, who looked into the matter. So I just think there's a good synergy between the proposal that's being brought forward here and what the community was looking for.
I would like to vote for it. I'm going to abstain as well, but I would like to vote for this proposal. And I think it can be a little tighter specifically to what the proposal was, because that's what we heard from town meeting. So I would like to provoke, I'm going to abstain if it's in this form.
Tied it to ID2?
No, tied into the,
Tied into the Bascom?
tied into the Dascom Road proposal, which was the conversation that Mr. Fink just alluded to at town meeting. We had a specific proposal for Dascom Road. Didn't have anything to do with River Road.
Wouldn't you want the task force to actually say, well, you know what, we think that this side of ID2 is incorrect, but that one, why limit their...
Because that's what I heard at town meeting. What I heard at town meeting was about this particular proposal.
Okay.
So that's what I heard.
So you
So you're
don't see
looking for-
value in looking beyond that?
Not in an open-ended thing, no, because I've been on those
So you're
teams.
looking for a task force to work with a specific developer to develop a proposal?
What I
Because I
heard,
think what
no.
Andrew's doing is bringing it up a level and saying, let's take a look at our ID2 parcels
Both,
and
yeah.
understand the community concerns about both our
We're
ID2
going around and
parcels.
around here, but what we heard from town meeting was one particular proposal. That's what we heard. That was the spirit of that conversation. It was about the Lapoli proposal. That was the conversation. That was the commitment, whether it was people promising or think they're promising. That was the request. I thought that was the spirit on that particular proposal. So to have it studied on that proposal, I think is appropriate. So this is trying to address what I thought came out of town meeting around one proposal, because those questions were not about River Road. They were not about some concept that wasn't there. They were about a specific proposal that was, in the public domain, pretty significantly. That's what the conversation was. So
that's your only objection?
yeah, it's.
So if, in fact, I
I
agree
think
with...
this can be a lot tighter, and I want to vote for it, Paul. I'm not.
I agree with you that
I was
town
part of the
meeting
one that
was-
voted for this thing, so.
I understand. That's why I'm trying
Yeah,
to
sure.
get to the bottom of this. So if in fact I agree with you, by the way, it was just about Dascom Road at that time. I think Andrew bringing forth this wanted to expand it to not make it so specific and so limiting that let this task force rule out River Road if it so chose to, or would there be, because this is very high level, very informational, would there be a benefit to having residential in the River Road area? Maybe, maybe not, but we're saying to them, you tell us.
Yeah,
make
and this board to vote
recommendations.
5-0 to say no to residential up there.
But
so
they're going to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, I just, again, and I just in the essence of time, we should move forward. But I think this whole concept is a direct result over a direct, very specific proposal that was made to town meeting. So this wasn't something that was on the edges. This was a very laser beam kind of focus. And I thought that we were going to move forward based on that. So,
Would the board be comfortable amending the charge to specifically say ID2/ID3, specific to Dascom Road? Based on your concerns?
I think it would be, it lessens the information that we'll get. I mean, if it's going to help Selectman Ms. Woolley get over that, then fine. I would certainly agree with it, but I think it just lessens it to a point where it just It's going to achieve the desired effect, but it's not, but we won't get the information on River Road just in case.
And-
That might be something, so.
So I think move forward with the vote, Paul, because this can go round and round. I want to.
Well, he's asking a question, and I answered it, and the other two selectmen have gone.
And I think it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. I mean, the committee could meet and be like, you know, hey, let's focus on one parcel. And you know, let's prioritize and let's focus on one parcel. You know, the committee could meet the first day and you know, another parcel or the other parcel could arise. And this would give them the flexibility. So it doesn't necessarily say that they need to work on both.
But I think we're trying to solve it. We're trying to solve it. I think a pretty significant, and I don't want to say problem, I'll say there was an opportunity that was presented to the town. And I thought we wanted to, you know, to have this group study that particular opportunity. And since, I guess, it's a circular discussion because the proponent has not come back with a request to have a special town meeting.
I don't think anything matters there. That doesn't matter. What
I think it does matter.
The creation of this
This would not
task force.
exist, Paul, if that proposal wasn't brought to town meeting.
I agree,
Yeah.
but the creation of this task force just brings forward information.
I understand.
So that the town itself can say, okay, these are the differences. These are the things that could be and not could be, and could not be. So
But you're just trying to diffuse some of the confusion that was very clear to all of us at town meeting, from my perspective.
Based on the proposal, you're right.
Agreed.
Based on the
Agreed.
proposal,
Agreed.
it wasn't,
Alex, I
you know,
agree.
it wouldn't have that would not have happened if
There wasn't a
there wasn't a private article that came in.
So Laura, to move forward, do you agree with limiting it just to Daskin, or not?
To me, it makes more sense to keep it more broad, to gather the information, to use the group for the most that we can use them for, and to use the expertise that they're going to gain through the process. And if that means that nothing's ever addressed on the River Road piece, fine.
They may choose to do that.
But why limit them to not being able to do that?
As their information gathering, you know, issues might come up about River Road that might help educate them about how to make the Daskin Road project better as well. So, you know, you might engage a larger universe of people with more of a broad task force charter.
I personally don't believe if we limit the discussion that it will help the whole idea of the task force. Why would we want to limit
Well,
it? They can limit it themselves.
We have a $6 million grant that's focused in on one area, has nothing to do with the other, right? So this is all part of that, right? I mean, we would not be in this conversation if it wasn't. I don't believe.
But when you say we have a $6 million grant, we don't know what we have.
I'm saying that's the one
We had
area.
a check presented with much fanfare in late April, and here we are 2 months later with nothing in
We have a
writing.
commitment from the Secretary of Economic Development.
We have
and Housing.
nothing in writing as
you
to
hear
the
that?
specifics of the 5 to 6 million, do we? Nothing.
Yeah, we do. We have
Really, we have a
specifics.
letter- do we have a letter of intent?
A man stood
We
in
don't have a
front of
letter
us.
of intent.
So does that mean we don't have the money? Did he commit the money?
We don't know the terms and
Did he commit the
conditions.
money? Excuse me.
He committed the money at the press conference, but with regard to a letter of intent, we don't.
We have no terms and conditions for that.
Okay.
We don't know how much is tied to housing, right?
But we also know that that may be
Okay,
a
is there any
chicken and egg
further discussion?
problem at this point.
What's that?
I said, it may be a chicken and egg problem. They may not have provided the specifics because of the residential component not being voted at town meeting.
I think they are waiting to see the town's next move before they give us a letter of intent. That's what I'm sure of, actually.
I'm
Is there
sorry, I
any further
didn't,
discussion?
can I ask a question, what statement you just made? Are you saying the state is waiting on us before they issue a
I
letter
think
of
they want to
intent?
wait to see if what kind of proposal is going to actually be built
So
before they give us an amount.
So the state grant, that in part was to solve public safety issues at the Daskin Road interchange, there will be none of that money available if there is no project?
Okay, let me explain it to you, okay? So this $6 million is tied directly to a grant, is tied directly to a specific project. That specific project had a housing component, which by nature has a different set of safety levels than a commercial project.
It was subject to town meeting
So-
vote, which didn't happen,
So-
and it was put forward that a portion of the grant, not all, a portion of the grant was subject to town meeting approval of the residential zoning. All of that has already transpired, so we should know now What is the result? What is the impact on the grant? Where do we stand?
I think I just told you that they're waiting to see if we put forth a commercial development or a commercial residential development.
So
And
the proponent.
They just got their answer to that a month ago.
No, they
No.
didn't.
But the,
No, they didn't.
but the proponent hasn't even brought it back yet, so. it's-
Right.
That's the, anyway.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we don't have time.
Is there any
for that.
further discussion? Anything from the public? Okay, it's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm gonna
Abstain.
Based just on my issue of
So
the
it's
charter.
302.